Here are my 3 audience members for my first persuasive speech. From 1900 to 1980, smallpox killed an estimated 300 million people, according to the World Health Organization. Since 1980, when they declared the world eradicated, exactly 0 people have even contracted the disease, thanks entirely to vaccinations. Even though there's evidence like this and a great history for vaccinations, there's been an overwhelming push in the last 15 to 20 years for people against vaccination. We refer to them as anti-vaxxers. So to kind of combat that push, I want to talk about the benefits of vaccinating your children, the safety of those vaccinations, and kind of some common arguments and some counters of those arguments for the anti-vaccination people. So vaccinating your kids is one of the easiest and most important medical decisions that you can make. Vaccinations have, on average every year, saved between 2 and 3 million lives of children, according to the World Health Organization. Science Daily did a study over the last 10 years and found that unvaccinated kids compared to vaccinated kids in the same communities and regions, the unvaccinated children are 6.5 times more likely to get pneumonia and 23 times more likely to get whooping cough. As well as there's an 84% decrease in the last 50 years for measles, and about the same for mumps and rubella. 100 years ago, measles killed hundreds of thousands of kids every year, and now that number is into the thousands, and it's not in this country. It's incredibly rare for a child to die of measles or mumps in this country. According to the Association of American Pediatricians, vaccines are between 90 and 90% effective at treating the diseases that they're aimed at. It just depends on different genetics for different kids. And then one of the most important parts of vaccinations is what's called herd immunity. The theory of herd immunity is that if between 90 and 95% of the community is vaccinated, then those kids who can't get vaccinated are still protected because no one else is going to be carrying that disease. Reasons that you can't get vaccinations, or if you're too young. Infants are only eligible for so many vaccinations because they don't have any kind of immunity. So inoculating them with the dead viruses is actually incredibly dangerous. Other reasons is if they have an autoimmune disease or if they're on chemo, anything that causes them to be immunocompromised for the same reasons as a baby, because then it could infect them at a way greater rate than it does you and me, and in turn actually make them sick. And the other is if they're allergic to one of the components. A very common one is the flu vaccine contains eggs. It's actually grown in chicken eggs, and so if you're allergic to eggs, you can't have the flu shot, which is one of the very first questions that you are asked anytime you go to get the flu shot. And because we know all this, because vaccines have gone through the ringer when it comes to safety. They are considered one of the safest medicines that you can take of any medicine in the world. There are incredibly strict guidelines for developing, testing, and distributing the vaccines. So once a pharmaceutical company develops a vaccine that they think will work, then the FDA spends years testing this vaccine aside and separate from the pharmaceutical companies to make sure that there's no crosses and no conflict of interest. And then after they get done and they deem it safe and they give it a license, then the CDC takes it and they have it for another few years. to make sure it's safe. So there's lots of protections. And then after it's pushed out for widespread use, it's incredibly closely monitored. There's actually 4 monitoring systems in the United States. There's the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, the Vaccine Safety Data Link, the Post-Licensure Rapid Immunization Safety Monitoring System, and the Clinical Immunization Safety Assessment. The CDC takes part in all of these, and then there's also the FDA and multiple other organizations that some are tied to the pharmaceutical companies, and then some are completely independent. All doctors and hospitals report any adverse effects. Patients can report them. It's open to anyone to report adverse effects that they think are caused by vaccines, and all of that is looked into incredibly strictly. And it's just one of the big safeguards. And in spite of the safety and the obvious use that they provide, there's still this growing contingent of people in the country who refuse it for a multitude of reasons. But the most common is that they have serious side effects. Well, the most common side effects with vaccines, one is a low-grade fever, which all that is your body's response to an infection, which is what a vaccine is. It's a low-dose infection to build an immune response. The second is anaphylaxis, which is an allergic reaction, which 1 in 1 million people will get one from a vaccine, compared to 25 million every year for all other causes of prophylaxis. The other is autism, which has come from a study by Dr. Wakefield, which has been incredibly debunked, and even he himself has said that he fabricated the data and falsified all of the information. There's also aluminum and thimerosal, which are components of most vaccines, except for thimerosal. It's only in flu vaccines, and they're both at very low levels that many different organizations have deemed to be safe. The other is that the government shouldn't dictate personal medical decisions. But the big argument against that is herd immunity again. If you aren't vaccinating your children, you're putting other children at risk. And at that point, then it is okay for the government to say, no, this is something you need to do. There's many more arguments, but there's not enough time to go over it. I could spend days talking about this. So, despite the giant, there's this push against them despite, proof that vaccinations are safe and that they have saved millions and millions and millions of lives in the last 100 years. So saving your child from experiencing a debilitating disease should be of utmost importance to you as a parent. You have that option with immunizations. Don't put your child or anyone else's child at risk when there's absolutely no reason. So go vaccinate your kids.
Good.
And then my audience.